What's up, everybody? My name is Josh Ramos. I am the executive producer of Wolfcry Productions, and yes, we're changing things up a bit. There's a new logo out, and I just decided to rebrand a little bit to make things look more modern. Plus, I think the wolf looks sweet. So today I'm going to be talking about B-roll, and B-roll is super important, and it's so overlooked. Clients never understand why B-roll is so important. They just think it's additional footage, but in reality it is what makes the entire film, and it's aggravating how low of a priority that amateurs and just people who don't know filmmaking put B-roll, because B-roll is the most important thing you will ever film in your life. And I just also want to mention really quickly that the style of B-roll that I'm going to be talking about is mainly docu-style or documentary style, and it's not the type of B-roll that you see for concept pieces where there's time remapping. And if you don't know anything that I'm saying, basically it's just you would shoot at a high frame rate so that you could do slow motion and fast motion and do all these different things to give it a more dramatic look. I'm really just looking at a cinematic documentary style. That is the style that I am the most experienced in. The clips that I'm going to be showing you too, they are from Matt White of Fourth Coast Productions. I'm giving him a huge shout out just because he has been my mentor while I started out my own company. I've been on actually all the shots that you're going to see. I was on the shoots with him. He's been teaching me so much, and these shots were from him. And I edited all the pieces and stuff like that you're about to see. I just didn't want people to think I shot these shots. I didn't. These are shots that he shot, but still, everything I'm going to be talking about, he has such great examples of everything. Let me classify what B-roll isn't. It isn't just pointing your camera at something that's relevant for the film and just shooting random shots, getting random things, all this other stuff. That is probably what amateurs screw up the most. It's supposed to be very stylistic, very particular, and every detail in a B-roll shot matters. Basically, the reason why we use B-roll, especially in the documentary style, is to cover up cuts if we are trying to hide dialogue mishaps. So if people are saying or thinking, there's long pauses, or they go on a little bit of a tangent and we just want some really sweet moments of just them talking, that's why you kind of have B-roll. But also B-roll is the energy of the shot. If you just sit and watch somebody talk for 2-3 minutes, depending on how long the marketing video is, it's gonna be boring, and it's super boring. B-roll is what gives it the energy. But I want to show you guys an example of just something this is a documentary that I made in college. I just pulled it back out. I haven't even watched it. I just found some samples real quick. But this is what the shot would look like with the B-roll.
It was a really big decision deciding to move out to Rochester to go to school here. It was really hard the first semester, just being away from home and everything, but I ended up really liking it out here. And then with nursing, there's a lot of opportunities here.
And this is what the same little sequence looks like without B-roll.
It was a really big decision deciding to move out to Rochester to go to school here. It was really hard the first semester, just being away from home and everything, but I ended up really liking it out here. And then with nursing, there's a lot of opportunities here.
So without the B-roll shots, you have a really bad film. One of the biggest things when I was first starting to do production with Matt was that he told me that when you are shooting B-roll, what you are trying to do is make your subject look larger than life, because that's what cinema really is. And here's just a quick little example of that. So you could have a shot that looks like this, where you're kind of eye level with the subject and you're moving a little bit and it's further away and it doesn't really fill the frame. Or you can have a shot like this that's super cinematic, and just you're making your subject look larger than life. It's more eye-pleasing, more entertaining. Normally you can achieve this by doing you can look up at their subject and then move around a little bit, close-ups. You just want a variety of angles to play with, but you want to make sure that whatever you are focusing on, that is what's filling most of the frame. when you are filming your B-roll shots too, you want to make sure that you're sitting there taking whatever shot that you're taking for at least 10 seconds per angle. So that way you know you have more than enough, because these shots are only going to be up for a couple seconds. So you have more than enough footage to play with when you're holding the camera. So like if you're doing a tilt or a pan, like you want to keep that pan and everything going for 10 seconds, just so that you know you have enough to play with. I kind of said this before already, but I really want to drive this home. Clients do not understand the importance of B-roll. If they do, they are a blessing. I have been on many shoots where people are just like, well, I mean, it's just B-roll, so we can only, I think an hour will be enough time. Absolutely not. If anything, the interview itself is probably about an hour. The B-roll is what we spend most of our time filming, because you got to set up the lights for every angle that you do. You got to make sure that the area is filled and the framing is right, the lighting is good. There's so much that you need to nitpick and look at the great details in B-roll, that each shot takes at least, 10 to 15 minutes just to set up. And then you go to another shot and another shot and another shot, and there's just so much happening, and it takes such time to really perfect those shots. I'm gonna leave Matt's website down below. I really want you guys just to check out how he does his B-roll, because I have always been jealous of how beautiful those shots are of the B-roll, because he really just takes his time to make sure every little thing looks perfect. Another thing that is very important when you're doing marketing and stuff like that, I know when I first started out filmmaking, that when I did B-roll, I didn't put the B-roll in until I had the music, because I would cut the B-roll to the music, and it would keep the energy. And if you're doing a concept piece where all you have is just background music, then obviously, yeah, that's what you're gonna do. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about when there's dialogue. And what you want to do, you don't add the music probably until the very end of everything, because you want the B-roll to match the dialogue of your subject, and that's what's going to keep the energy going. Your subject, or whoever's talking, so the dialogue, that is your story, and you want the B-roll to emphasize the story, create energy and movement for the story, and then you just have the music kind of enhance the overall tone. But if the B-roll isn't going with the dialogue, then it just doesn't make sense. You can't just randomly show B-roll. There's something that Matt really embedded into my brain when it came to editing B-roll, but also shooting B-roll, and that is called sequencing. Here's a shot that we did for Embark Cider Works, I think it is. We shot a company that was canning their beers, and so this is what the shots kind of look like. You can see that we have the shot of the guy putting the can down. The cans get filled with the alcohol. They get their lids put on them. They get the sticker put on them. They come out. The guys put it in the box, and the box goes onto the crate. That's sequencing. Watching something from start to finish with the B-roll, that's sequencing. If you are just shooting random things with absolutely no sequence, your B-roll is going to be all over the place and not really make sense. So the key thing to do, or to make sure that you are sequencing and that your B-roll alone is telling a story, if you mute the dialogue and watch the B-roll, you should have a fair understanding of what is going on. If you don't really know what's going on just by looking at the B-roll, you're not sequencing, and the B-roll is all over the place, and that's a very rookie mistake. So sequence your shots, shoot everything in order. When we film people cooking, we literally have them, whatever recipe that they have, all the ingredients, we ask them to basically triple it, because in that way we can get different angles of them doing certain things, and we can have the sequence of it. Because if they just make it once but we don't have different angles to cut to, it's going to be pretty dry and boring. You might have the sequence, but you don't have different angles. So you need to sequence, you need different angles, and your B-roll needs to tell a story. What sequencing also does is that it allows you to get to different areas naturally, I guess, if that makes sense. So like if we had somebody walking into a building, now we can show shots of that building, whereas if you just went to the building nobody really knows where they are. Then like you shoot in a different location in the same building, nobody really knows what's going on. So you need to make sure that you're not jumping from place to place to place within the B-roll. That's something that I did often, and it's not good. It's not professional. So you want to make sure that when you start going into like a new area or a new sequence, that it flows naturally. And it's really hard to tell you guys how to do that or even show you. It's just something that when you watch it, it feels natural. Normally, if you are going from one place to the next and you have somebody talking in the background, you will show that person talking, and then when you go to that next area, everybody knows, okay, now we're in a new location. Whereas if you just cut to a new location, it throws the viewer off a little bit. When you are cutting between angles too, you don't want to go from like a close-up to another close-up unless you're trying to show like a variety. So we shot a lot of things on apple farms, and obviously when we showed the apples, some of the angles were the same, but we tried to make it so like you knew it was a different shot and it didn't look too similar. So you really want to give the viewers some space when they're in the rooms. If you just keep cutting with the same angles, the shots are all going to look the same, and that's going to be just as boring. You want to create energy by creating, a far shot, close up, medium, close up, far shot, close up, medium, that kind of thing. Like you want there to be a rhythm, but you want it to flow at the same time. If you watch vloggers or just people who talk in front of a camera for a long time, they will do those cuts that are, close up, medium, far, just so that way it creates energy and you're not watching the same angle the whole time. So it's the same concept with B-roll. When you are looking to film a subject or an object, you really want you just want the overall shot to look pleasing. And normally what you're doing, you're looking for light flares, lighting in general, textures, patterns, something in the background that when you use the depth of field, it looks really nice, and that is what Matt perfects and does a really great job at. So like one of these shots, it's just a jar, but what we ended up doing, we actually had an LED light and we had it almost directly behind the jar, and it lit the jar up a certain way, and it just looked really cool, just the texture that it created, and it didn't look flat. You always want your space to look dimensional. If it looks flat, it looks boring. Movement, the energy. You guys have heard me talk about this a lot just in this video, but you always need to have movement, and the movement needs to be already taking place by the time you cut to the shot. So if I went to go grab something and I pulled it back, you don't want to see whatever object I'm about to grab, even if it's like 5 frames, and then you start seeing my hand come in and pick it up. My hand should already be in the frame moving towards the object, because if there's even just a little bit of like a stationary shot, no movement at all, it's obvious and it sticks out, and it really pulls the viewer out of the moment, that the universe that you just created. One more thing I want to add on when it comes to somebody performing an action. So for example, me grabbing that camera, for some reason, everybody likes to slow down for the camera. There is no reason for people to slow down. Have your subject perform the action as if there were no cameras around. For 2 main reasons. 1, it looks a lot more natural. And 2, because these shots are up so quickly, you do not have time for somebody to perform an action slowly. I have seen so many times when you ask somebody like, oh, can you just grab a jar of milk or just whatever they have, and they just go, there's no need. Just have them do it just like they normally would, so that way the pacing is correct and it's just very energetic. There always needs to be movement when you're doing a drone shot. We always try to make it so like you can see a car going by the shot, or when we shot at an apple farm, we had the people picking the apples. This one, there wasn't really a lot of movement except for the camera, because we had the drone going in pretty fast, so that created enough movement. There's always something moving in the drone shots because it creates that energy. And yeah, there's obviously exceptions where sometimes the shot alone is just beautiful, you don't even need movement. Like, that's fine. Use your judgment, obviously. But we always try to create some sort of movement when we are shooting just a stationary object. So like usually foods or products. The camera is what's creating the movement, but those shots are up for like a second and a half versus shots that already have natural movement to them. They can be up for 3 seconds just because there's just so much going on that the viewer has a lot to see. I know I said a lot, so I just want to break it down for you guys real quick. The biggest thing you have to do is sequence. You need to sequence. It's super important that you're shooting stuff from beginning to end. You have enough material to cut between, so 10 seconds each angle. You're just creating a rhythm. You're creating a story with your B-roll. B-roll is super underappreciated. It is super important that you pay more attention to the B-roll than probably anything else, except for audio, but whatever. There always needs to be movement and energy. Lighting is huge when it comes to B-roll, super important. The dialogue is your key, and you cut your B-roll to the dialogue. Do not cut the B-roll to the music. The dialogue is the most important part. You can also just take your time setting up these shots. Super important. And yeah, I really hope you guys found this helpful, and if you did, please leave a like down below, subscribe for more. I do post weekly, and I'd love to hear what material or just videos you guys want me to do. I just love doing this stuff. I'm not running out of ideas, I promise you. No, I'm just kidding. I got ideas, but I really want to make sure that the content I'm creating is something you guys really do want to see. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, please let me know down in the comments below. And yeah, I'll definitely do videos on it or just respond. Yeah, guys, that is basically it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I really should move that clock because it keeps popping out of my head and it looks weird. All right, enjoy the new outro. Bye.